I hadn't seen Elijah in 4 years. Not really. A few Instagram stories here and there. One awkward Thanksgiving where he showed up late and left early. But the real him, the boy I used to fish with at the pond behind his father's barn, the one who once dared me to kiss a scarecrow for $1, had drifted somewhere in the haze of time until I got the call. It came just after 10:30 p.m. I was already in bed, half asleep, the hum of city life faint through the cracked window. My phone buzzed, and for some reason, I picked it up. "Hey," a voice said. I didn't recognize it at first. It was deeper than I remembered, rough around the edges. "It's Eli." I sat up. "Elijah?" "Yeah." I hadn't spoken to him since my dad's funeral 2 years ago. Even then, he just nodded across the room. No words. I need a favor." His voice cracked a little, like the words themselves didn't want to come out. "Are you okay?" "No, not really." I pushed the sheets off. "What's going on?" He hesitated. "Can you come back for a while?" I blinked. "Back to Fairgrove?" "Yeah, I know it's short notice. I wouldn't ask if I wasn't desperate." "What happened?" He exhaled. "It's the farm. It's my dad. He had a stroke." I froze. His dad was a tough man. Stubborn as hell. I'd never imagined him in a hospital bed. "I'm sorry, man." "Is he?" "Alive. Barely. I'm trying to run things, but I'm drowning out here. He paused again. "I just need someone I can trust." My mind raced. Work, deadlines, rent, my life in the city that, honestly, hadn't felt like much of a life lately. "I can drive out tomorrow," I said before I even fully processed it. "You will?" "Yeah, of course." He was quiet for a moment. "Thanks, Noah." And just like that, I was packing a duffel bag at midnight, trying not to think about the boy who once carved our initials into a barn wall and said it was just a joke, or about the fact that I never really figured out what I felt about him after all these years. The drive to Fairgrove was longer than I remembered, maybe because the roads were emptier, or maybe because I wasn't the same person who'd left them behind. When I finally pulled up to the farmhouse, it looked almost exactly the same. White siding chipped at the corners. Porch swing rusted, but still hanging. The barn stood tall in the back, its red paint faded like a memory. Elijah was on the porch, a little taller, a little leaner. His hands were dirty, his shirt wrinkled, and his face, God, his face looked like he hadn't slept in a week. "Hey," he said when I stepped out. I nodded. "Hey." We stood there a second too long before he pulled me into a one-armed hug. He smelled like hay and sweat and something that made my chest ache. "You drove all night?" "Just about." "Come in. I'll get you something to drink." The house felt smaller. Or maybe my memories had just stretched the walls over the years. He poured me a glass of sweet tea and leaned against the counter. I didn't know who else to call. "I'm glad you did." He rubbed the back of his neck. "Dad's at the hospital an hour away. They say it'll be months of rehab. If he even gets out." "I'm sorry, man." He left everything to me. The chores, the equipment, the books. I can barely keep up. I didn't even know goats needed their hooves trimmed. "You have goats now?" Long story. He gave me a tired smile. One I hadn't seen since high school. The one he used when he was in over his head. "I'll help with whatever I can," I said. "You sure? It's hard work." "So were finals, and you got me through those. Time to return the favor." He looked at me then, really looked. Something passed between us. Maybe gratitude. Maybe something heavier. That night, I stayed in the guest room. It still had the same quilt his mom had made before she passed. The smell of the house hadn't changed, earthy and warm, like fresh bread and dust. Sleep came slowly. In the morning, he woke me before dawn. We fed the animals in silence, side by side like we used to. I fumbled with the chicken feed. He smirked. "You're city soft," says the guy who cried when he stepped on a slug. He laughed, and it felt like music, like the years hadn't taken everything after all. Over the next few days, we fell into a rhythm. Chores in the morning, hospital visits in the afternoon, long walks at sunset when we were too tired to speak. And then one evening, something changed. We were in the barn, stacking hay. The sun poured through the slats, golden and soft. I was wiping sweat from my brow when he stopped mid-lift and just looked at me. "What?" He didn't answer right away. I never said it. Said what? What it meant to me that you came. I shrugged. "You don't have to." "I do." He stepped closer, close enough that I could see the scar above his eyebrow, the one he got falling off his bike when we were 12. "You didn't just save the farm," he said. "You brought me back." His voice was different now, softer, frayed at the edges. "Elijah, I've thought about you," he said quickly, like he was afraid he'd lose courage. "A lot, more than I should have." My mouth went dry. "I used to tell myself it was just nostalgia," he continued. "Missing the past. Missing us." "There was no us," I said, though my voice cracked. He looked down. "Maybe not then, but maybe there could be." Silence. My heart pounded. My hands shook. "Why now?" I asked, "After all this time?" "Because I'm tired of pretending." His eyes met mine. "And I think you are too." I didn't say anything right away. I couldn't. The way Elijah was looking at me. It was the kind of look that made time feel heavy, like it wanted to pause there just to see what I would do. His words hung in the warm air of the barn, somewhere between confession and hope, and I could feel something inside me shift. But I wasn't ready to name it. Instead, I turned back to the hay bale, pretending I hadn't heard him right. "It's been a long day," I mumbled. He didn't push. He just nodded once, grabbed the last of the feed buckets, and walked off toward the chicken coop like we hadn't just stepped over a line that had stayed untouched for years. I lay awake that night, staring at the ceiling, the sound of frogs croaking outside filling the silence in my head. My brain kept running back over every moment, how close he'd stood, the way his voice cracked just a little, and most of all, the way part of me wanted to turn around and close the space between us. But I didn't, because even though I'd spent years wondering what might have happened if either of us had ever said something, it was easy to leave those feelings tucked away. They were safer that way, less risky. The next morning, we worked like nothing had happened. He handed me a rake without looking directly at me, and I pretended not to notice the way his fingers lingered a beat too long when they brushed mine. We didn't talk about feelings or memories or that moment in the barn. We just worked, and for a while it was enough. But by the fourth day, the tension was growing too loud to ignore. It wasn't anger. It wasn't even awkwardness. It was something charged, a kind of static that made my skin buzz whenever he got too close. Every glance, every brush of an arm, every shared laugh that went on just a little too long, it all built up like pressure behind a dam. And then came the thunderstorm. It rolled in out of nowhere, thick clouds swallowing the sun, thunder cracking in the distance like the sky itself was unraveling. We rushed to get the animals inside, our boots kicking up mud as the first heavy drops started to fall. We were both soaked by the time we got back to the barn. My shirt clung to me, hair dripping into my eyes. Elijah pushed the door shut behind us, his breath ragged, chest rising and falling. We stood there, dripping in the dark, the storm pounding on the tin roof. And finally he spoke. I meant what I said the other day. I turned slowly. His eyes were fixed on mine, intense, unreadable. "Elijah, I'm not saying this to make things weird," he said, voice low. I've spent years trying to figure out why no one ever measured up, why every relationship I tried felt like something was missing. And you think it's me? I asked, heart pounding. He nodded. "I think I never stopped wanting you." I stared at him. The storm seemed to quiet for a second, like the world was leaning in too. "Do you remember that night by the lake?" he asked suddenly. I did. We were 16, tipsy off a couple stolen beers, lying on our backs watching the stars. He had reached over, brushed my knuckles with his, said something about how if we were still single at 30, we'd just marry each other. I'd laughed, called him a sap, but when he fell asleep beside me, our shoulders touching, I'd stared at the sky and wondered what it would feel like if he meant it. "You didn't say anything back then either," he said, "because I didn't know how." He stepped forward. "Just once." Do you know now? I didn't answer with words. I couldn't. Instead, I closed the distance between us and kissed him. It wasn't gentle. It wasn't planned. It was messy and soaked and tasted like rain and regret, and all the time we'd wasted not doing this sooner. His hand slid up to my jaw, mine into his soaked shirt, and for a moment, the storm outside was nothing compared to the one inside me. When we finally pulled apart, he laughed breathlessly. About damn time. I laughed too, forehead against his. Yeah, about time. We didn't talk much that night. We just changed into dry clothes and sat side by side in front of the old fireplace, watching the flames curl upward like they were trying to say everything we couldn't. He rested his head on my shoulder. I didn't move. By the next morning, everything should have felt different. But it didn't. Not really. We still had goats to feed. Still had broken fence posts to fix. Still had hospital check-ins and receipts to sort through. But something between us had shifted. Something small and quiet and real. He'd bump my shoulder while we walked. I'd steal his coffee. He started calling me city boy again, but with a softness behind it. It felt easy, like breathing. But with that ease came something else. Doubt, because this wasn't the city. This wasn't where I lived. This wasn't permanent. And neither of us had said a word about what any of it meant long term. So when I got a call from my boss asking when I was coming back, I froze. Elijah was fixing a tractor part nearby. I watched him, sleeves rolled up, grease on his cheek, completely unaware of the panic rising in my chest. "Everything okay?" he asked when I didn't hang up right away. I nodded too quickly. "Yeah, just work stuff." He didn't push, but I saw in his face. He knew something was coming. I didn't call my boss back right away. I told myself I needed time to think. But really, I was just scared. Scared that saying anything out loud would make it real. That once I acknowledged the weight of it, I'd have to decide what I wanted and what I was willing to leave behind. Elijah didn't bring it up again, but the space between us started to shift. Not in an obvious way. We still worked side by side. Still shared quiet dinners. Still stole glances when we thought the other wasn't looking. But there was something unspoken threading through every moment. Like we both knew a clock had started ticking. I'd been in Fairgrove for almost 2 weeks now. Longer than I'd planned. My apartment lease back home was up for renewal. My supervisor had left me 2 voicemails asking about deadlines. And I still hadn't answered them. I kept telling myself I was just helping Elijah. That I was doing a good thing. That this was temporary. But the truth was, it didn't feel temporary anymore. One night, after a long day fixing the irrigation line, we sat on the porch sipping beers. The sun had already dipped below the horizon, the air thick with summer heat and the buzz of cicadas. Elijah leaned back in the rocking chair, looking more peaceful than I'd seen him in years. "I forgot how much I missed this," he said, voice low. "This." Sitting outside, not rushing anywhere, feeling like life's not trying to outrun me. I nodded, sipping my drink. "Yeah, city doesn't really do slow." He glanced at me. "You ever think about leaving it?" I hesitated. "Sometimes." He didn't say anything after that, but I could feel the weight of the question hanging there, unsaid. "Would you ever leave it for me?" But I didn't answer. I didn't know how. The next morning, I woke up to find him already gone. A note on the kitchen table, and his handwriting said, "Gone to the co-op. Be back by noon. Don't feed the goats. They've already calmed me once today." I smiled at that. I spent the morning reorganizing the shed, trying not to think too hard, trying not to imagine what it would be like to stay, to make this life something real. But the more I thought about it, the more impossible it felt. I wasn't a farmer. I didn't know how to live without subways and corner delis and crowded sidewalks. And yet, there was something here I couldn't ignore. Something that made breathing easier. That made me feel seen in a way the city never had. When Elijah got back, he looked tense, distracted. "You okay?" I asked. He tossed the truck keys on the table. Ran into Ben at the co-op. Ben was an old classmate of ours. He'd been tight with Elijah back in school. I remembered him as the kind of guy who always had something to prove. "Oh yeah? How's he?" Elijah snorted. "Nosy. asked what I was doing with this city guy hanging around so long. I raised an eyebrow. And what did you tell him? That you were helping, that we were catching up, that it's none of his damn business. Something in his voice made me pause. Defensive, protective. Did he say anything else? Elijah shook his head, avoiding my eyes. Doesn't matter. But it did. I could feel it. Later that night, after dinner, I found him in the barn, sitting on the edge of a hay bale, staring at the ground. I sat beside him, the familiar scent of straw and animals surrounding us like a childhood memory. What's going on? I asked. He sighed. You ever feel like people already decided who you're supposed to be, and no matter how much you grow, they won't let you be anything else? All the time. He looked at me. Ben called me confused. Said I've always had a soft spot for you, even when we were kids. Is he wrong? He didn't answer right away. I don't know. Maybe I was confused back then, but not now. He turned to me, eyes shining with something raw. You make things feel clear. My heart thudded. But I also know you've got a whole life waiting for you. Deadlines, city lights, people who actually get you. I don't think anyone gets me like you do, I said quietly. He smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. Doesn't change the fact that you're going back. I didn't say anything, because I didn't know if he was wrong. That night, we lay in the guest bed, something we'd done a few times now when the thunderstorms rolled in or the nights got too quiet. He was facing away, but I could feel his breathing shift. Slower, deeper. Are you asleep? I whispered. No. I waited. I want to ask you something, he said. Okay. If this whatever this is was real, would it only exist here? The question cut deeper than I expected. I don't know. I admitted. He turned to face me in the dark, his voice barely above a whisper. Then maybe we're just pretending. My chest tightened. We're not pretending. I said, then prove it. I blinked. How? He didn't answer, just rolled over again, leaving the space between us colder than it had been in weeks. I didn't sleep much after that. And the next morning, he was distant, not angry, just quiet, focused, like he was building walls again. By the afternoon, I found him working on the fence out by the west field, alone, shirt off, sweat glistening on his back. It would have been beautiful if it didn't hurt so much. Elijah, I called. He didn't turn. Elijah. What? I flinched. His voice wasn't loud, but it was sharp. I'm trying, I said. He turned then. So am I. We stood in silence for a long time. The sun beat down. The wind barely moved. Finally, he sighed. I'm scared, Noah. I am too. He looked at me. Then what are we doing? I stepped closer. Something that matters. He didn't move, but he didn't back away either. The next few days passed in a blur. We didn't talk much, but the silence wasn't empty. It was loaded. Every glance across the barn, every quiet breakfast, every moment we stood too close and then backed away. We were both waiting, I think, waiting for the other to say something first, to make it real, or to end it before it got too hard. I was supposed to leave the following week. My boss had finally sent a text that said, we need a final answer. Monday, and I still hadn't written back. I wasn't stalling because I didn't care about my job. I was stalling because I knew whatever I chose, something would break. It rained again on Friday. We were sitting in the truck after hauling feed from mill, the windows fogged slightly from our breath and humidity outside. Elijah drummed his fingers on the steering wheel, restless. Do you ever think about what your life would look like if one thing had gone differently? He asked suddenly. All the time, I said. Like if I hadn't moved away after high school. He looked at me. Or if I'd kissed you instead of pretending it was a joke that time at the lake. I smiled faintly. You remember that? Every second of it. We sat in silence again, the kind that pressed against your chest. Then he turned toward me, eyes dark but soft. What do we do now? I shook my head. I don't know. He laughed under his breath, not from amusement, but from frustration. God, I wish you'd just tell me, one way or the other. I blinked. Tell you what. Tell me if I'm crazy for thinking this is real. Or if it's just a summer thing for you. A nostalgia trip. It's not that. Then what is it, Noah? I struggled to speak. It's hard. No, loving someone is hard. Wanting someone is hard. But honesty, that's just a choice. He wasn't shouting, but I could hear it in his voice, the crack, the plea underneath. I'm not good at this, I whispered. You know I'm not. But I need you to be. He stared at me, jaw tight, waiting. I could have told him I wanted to stay. I could have told him the truth. But I didn't. I looked away. He didn't say anything else. Just turned the key and drove us home in silence. That night, he didn't come inside. I waited for hours, listening for the door, but it never opened. I peeked out once and saw him out at the barn, the light still on, alone. I wanted to go to him. I should have. But instead, I lay there, wondering when I had gotten so afraid of wanting something. The next morning, he was gone by sunrise. I found a note on the fridge. Took the truck to the mechanic. Be back late. Don't wait up. I read it twice, but the words didn't feel like his. They felt like someone pulling away. I busied myself with chores. I fixed a cracked water pipe in the garden, repaired a fence post we'd been ignoring, tried to cook dinner, but burned the rice and left it all untouched on the stove. By the time 8 p.m. rolled around and he still wasn't back, I started to worry, not just about us, but about him, about where his head might be. I tried calling. No answer. The storm clouds started building around 9. I stood on the porch, watching the sky split in flashes, my stomach twisting. When his headlights finally appeared in the distance, I felt myself breathe for the first time in hours. But when he stepped out of the truck, I knew something was off. His shoulders were hunched, eyes tired, jaw clenched like he'd been grinding his teeth for miles. He didn't say anything as he passed me. Elijah, I'm tired, he said without turning. But let it go, Noah, just for tonight. He disappeared into his room, and I just stood there, letting the storm roll in around me. That night, I couldn't sleep. My chest ached like something was trying to claw its way out, and I realized I couldn't leave things like this. Not because I was scared of losing him, but because I was scared I already had. I got up and walked to his door, knocked once. Silence. Elijah, I need to say something. Still nothing. So I just kept going. I didn't come here planning to feel any of this. You called me, and I came because you needed help. That was it. That's what I told myself. But the truth is, when I saw you on that porch, it all came back. Everything I never let myself admit. I exhaled shakily. I didn't stay because I felt obligated. I stayed because I didn't want to leave. Because for the first time in years, I felt like I was exactly where I was supposed to be. The door creaked open slowly, and he stood there, shirtless, eyes rimmed with exhaustion and something else. Something quieter. I don't know how to do this, I said, but I know I want to try. If you'll let me. He looked at me for a long time, then stepped back, just enough for me to come in. I did. We didn't touch. We didn't kiss. We just sat there on the edge of his bed, both of us breathing the same air, finally facing something we'd been dancing around for a decade. You don't have to stay, he said softly. I know, but I want you to. I nodded. I think I want that too. He leaned his head on my shoulder, and I rested mine on top of his. And just like that, the storm outside passed. But we both knew another one was coming. Because love like this doesn't wait. It either grows or it explodes. The next morning felt different. Not because the sun rose any brighter or the birds sang any louder, but because something unspoken between Elijah and me had finally settled. It wasn't resolution. It wasn't peace. But it was something that felt like honesty. We moved a little slower around each other, but not out of discomfort, more like caution, like we both knew this could break if we weren't careful. He handed me a cup of coffee before I even asked, the way he always did now. Our fingers touched for a second longer than they needed to, and he smiled faintly but didn't look up. I didn't need him to. We worked side by side the way we had been for weeks, fixing the tractor belt that kept slipping, checking the fences on the back acreage. The small things that kept life from collapsing. But for once, the silence between us felt warm. Not heavy, like maybe we were building something after all. But peace, I've learned, is always temporary. Late that afternoon, his phone rang while we were tightening the last gate hinge. He answered it quickly, stepping away just far enough for me to hear only fragments. Yeah, he's still here. I know. I didn't expect it either. Just don't. I said, don't, Ben. I froze. Ben. That name again. Elijah ended the call with a sharp goodbye, then tossed his phone onto the porch bench like it burned his hand. I waited a moment before asking, "You okay?" "Fine," he said too fast. Then added, "It's nothing." I raised an eyebrow. It didn't sound like nothing. He ran a hand through his hair. "Ben thinks he knows everything." "Elijah," he sighed, dropping into the rocking chair. "He's just being a jerk. Keeps poking around. Asking why you're still here. Why I haven't told certain people. He saw us in town the other day and apparently made his own assumptions." I sat down beside him. And he's stirring up crap I don't need right now." "You mean gossip?" "I mean people around here talk. They remember when we were inseparable as kids, and they love to fill in blanks." I hesitated. "And what are they saying?" He looked at me, expression unreadable, "that we're more than friends, that you're staying for reasons other than the farm." Well, they're not wrong. I know, but that doesn't make it easier. There was something in his tone I hadn't heard before. Not anger, not fear, something like shame. "Elijah, are you embarrassed?" "No," he snapped. "I'm frustrated. I've spent years trying to get people around here to take me seriously. I finally got them to trust me with the farm, with real responsibilities. And now one look at us sharing coffee on the porch, and I'm back to being a joke." I sat with that for a second, let it sting. "So what? We pretend this didn't happen?" He looked away. "I'm not asking you to hold my hand in public," I said, "but I also won't be your secret." He didn't respond. Instead, he got up and went inside, and that's when the fear started crawling back. Not fear of him, not even fear of rejection. Fear that all of this, everything we'd shared, might only exist in the safety of late nights and rainstorms. That when the world came knocking, he'd hide again. That I'd be left standing on the porch alone, waiting for a version of him that didn't exist when people were watching. That night, I wrote my resignation email. Not because I was sure I wanted to stay, but because I needed to know if I could. If I gave this a real shot, would he? I didn't hit send. I saved it in drafts. I wanted to give him the chance to fight for this first. The next morning, we barely spoke. He handed me a toolbox for the broken well pump. I fixed the gasket while he checked irrigation lines. We didn't meet eyes once. At lunch, I asked him plainly, "Do you want me to go?" He froze mid-bite. "What?" "Because if you're just waiting for this to fizzle out, tell me now." He stared at the table, jaw clenched. Then finally said, "No, I don't want you to go. But I'm scared, okay?" I waited. I'm scared that if I say the wrong thing to the wrong person, the whole town turns on me. That my dad hears something from someone else before I get to tell him myself. That I lose everything we've worked for over something I don't even know how to name yet. I swallowed hard. "I'm not asking you to come out to the entire county fair," I said. "I'm asking you not to push me away because it's easier than being brave." He looked up, eyes glassy. "I'm trying." I know. That night, we sat under the stars again. No words, just quiet breaths and the occasional sound of cricket. He leaned against my shoulder and I let him, but I knew something had shifted. The next morning, he woke me early. "I want to take you somewhere," he said. We drove out past the old silos, beyond the last row of hay bales, down a dirt road that looked forgotten, until we reached the lake. Our lake, the one we used to sneak beers by, where we'd once dared each other to skinny dip, and then spent the entire night pretending we didn't want to. He parked the truck and turned off the engine. "I used to come here after fights with my dad," he said, "or after a long harvest day when I couldn't feel my hands." He turned to me. "This place always made me feel like I could be honest." I didn't say anything. He stepped out of the truck, walked to the water's edge, and sat down in the tall grass. I joined him. I'm not ashamed of you, he said quietly. I looked at him. I'm ashamed that it's taken me this long to admit who I am. Elijah, he reached into his pocket and handed me his phone. Hit send. I looked down. It was a text draft addressed to his dad. Hey, just wanted you to hear it from me first. Noah's more than a friend. I hope that's okay. If it's not, I still need to be honest about it. My heart clenched. Are you sure? He nodded. I need to stop pretending. I hit send. He exhaled like he'd been holding his breath for years. And for the first time in days, he smiled. Really smiled. I guess we're not hiding anymore. No, I said. We're not. The lake glistened behind us. And even though the future still felt uncertain, for the first time it felt possible. We sat in silence after I hit send. The lake rippled gently in front of us, but neither of us moved. Elijah kept staring at his phone, like it might explode in his hand, his thumb hovering near the screen, even though there was nothing left to do. It was done. I could hear his breath, slow, measured, not calm, just controlled, like someone bracing for impact. He didn't say anything for a while, and I didn't push. I just sat beside him, letting my shoulder rest lightly against his, hoping that even if he regretted it, he'd know I was still here. You think I messed up? He finally asked, voice low. No, I said without hesitation. I think you finally did something for you. He nodded slowly. Then why does it feel like I'm about to throw up? Because it matters. He gave a quiet, dry laugh. Yeah, that's probably it. We stayed by the lake for another half hour. No reply came. Not a single word from his dad. Not even a question mark or an angry text. Just silence. And that, somehow, felt worse. Back at the house, Elijah was distracted. He kept checking his phone, tapping the screen, swiping to refresh, even though we both knew texts don't need refreshing. I made us lunch. He barely touched it. Around 2 p.m., his phone buzzed. He flinched so hard he nearly dropped it, then picked it up slowly, staring at the screen. I watched his face. He blinked once. Then again, his jaw tightened. His lips parted like he was going to speak, but he didn't. What is it? I asked gently. He turned the screen toward me. The message was short. I figured. Took you long enough. Your life, your call. Just be smart about it. That was it. I waited for him to react. Something, anything, but he just lowered the phone to his lap, staring at the empty space in front of him. Elijah? He looked up at me, blinking hard. He didn't freak out. No, I said. He didn't. He didn't say much of anything. He didn't reject you either. He exhaled like he'd been punched in the gut. I really thought he'd cut me off, disown me. Hell, I imagined he'd show up here yelling. But he didn't. He leaned back in the chair, staring at the ceiling. Why does that make me feel worse somehow? Because all that fear you've been carrying, you built it up for years. And now that it's gone, it's like you don't know where to put it. He looked at me then, really looked. And for once, the fear in his eyes was matched by something else. Hope. He knows, he whispered. And he didn't hate me for it. No, he didn't. And that means I don't have to hide anymore. I smiled. Exactly. He let out a breath that turned into a laugh. And suddenly he was up, walking across the kitchen, then turning around and walking back like he couldn't sit still. I want to tell Ben, he said, before he hears it from someone else. Are you sure? He nodded. I need to. So he did. A simple call. A few deep breaths. A quiet explanation. Ben didn't say much. Mostly just, okay, man, and you good? But that was enough. Elijah hung up and turned to me with a small, stunned grin on his face. You know what's weird? He said. It almost feels normal. I stepped closer. Maybe it is. He laughed again, then wrapped his arms around me in a hug that felt lighter than any we'd shared before. Not desperate, not secret, just full. We didn't do anything crazy to celebrate. We just had dinner, shared a beer on the porch, and let the night be soft for once. No big decorations. No what ifs. Just the sound of frogs and the warm breeze and the quiet knowledge that something real was starting to take root. But of course, life doesn't slow down just because your heart's catching up. The next morning, I woke up to an email from my boss. Need an answer today. Your project's being reassigned if we don't hear back. I stared at the screen for a long time. I didn't want to go back, but I didn't know how to stay. I walked out to the barn where Elijah was feeding the goats, the early sun casting golden streaks through the gaps in the boards. "Hey," I said. He turned. "Morning." I held up my phone. "They want an answer." He nodded slowly, wiping his hands on a towel. And I looked at him, and I realized I couldn't make this decision in the silence of my own head. I needed him to want it too. "Elijah, do you want to stay?" He froze, then walked toward me, eyes locked on mine. "I want you to stay," he said, "but not because you feel guilty, or because I'm scared to lose you. I don't. I want you to stay because this is your life too, because it means something to you. It does." He smiled. "Then let's figure it out." So we did. We sat down at the kitchen table, me with a notebook, him with his laptop. We looked at options: freelance remote work, creative consulting. We even half-joked about me running the farm social media, though he quickly added, "Only if you never say the word hashtag out loud." We made no promises, just a plan. That evening, I hit send on my resignation, and when I closed the laptop, Elijah reached over and took my hand like it was the most natural thing in the world, because maybe now it's strange how fast something unfamiliar can start to feel like home. After I sent that resignation email, there was no lightning strike, no deep epiphany. Just me and Elijah sitting in the kitchen, him chewing on a piece of apple while I closed my laptop and exhaled. I think he expected me to panic or cry or question all, but instead I felt calm, not because I had it all figured out, but because, for the first time in a long time, I didn't feel like I was running from myself. The days started falling into a rhythm. Mornings were early but quiet, full of little things that grounded me. Coffee that didn't come from a paper cup, muddy boots on hardwood, the distant sound of roosters like a strange kind of alarm clock. Elijah moved through it all like he was built for it, his sleeves rolled up, jaw dusted with stubble, and a steadiness in him that made me want to anchor myself to that energy. But with comfort came questions. Not from him, not from me, but from the outside world. It started when someone left a note on the porch. It was folded in half, no envelope, just a scribbled line in sharp ink. "Careful who you let see your private life. People talk." Elijah read it in silence, face stone still. Then he crumpled it up and tossed it in the trash. I could see it in his shoulders, though. Tight again, coiled like a spring. "You okay?" I asked. "Yeah," he said. "People are just bored." "But does it bother you?" He paused. "It used to. And now." He looked at me for a moment, then gave a small smile. "Now I've got something better to think about." But I could still feel the weight of the note between us, even after it was gone. Later that week, I started building a raised garden bed beside the barn. Elijah said it was unnecessary, that the soil was fine, but I needed something with my own hands, something that wasn't his. It wasn't about control. It was about belonging, about proof I hadn't just drifted in and clung to someone else's world. One morning, while I was sketching plans of bed, a car pulled into the drive. It wasn't familiar. Elijah walked out of the barn, wiping his hands on a rag, his brow already furrowed. The car door opened and out stepped someone I hadn't seen in years. Jake, Elijah's younger cousin. They used to be close. Used to spend summers here, racing bikes and building tree forts before things changed. I hadn't seen him since I was 19. He looked older now, bulkier, more polished. City shirt tucked into clean jeans like he'd just stepped off a real estate lot. His eyes flicked to me, then back to Elijah. "Well," he said, "heard you've been busy." Elijah gave a stiff nod. "Didn't know you were in town." Jake shrugged. "Business trip. Thought I'd drop by." I could already tell this wasn't a friendly visit. Jake leaned against the truck. "You know, people are saying some weird things." about the new arrangement here. Elijah's jaw tightened. Did you come to talk about crops or gossip? Jake chuckled. Just surprise is all. You've always been so private. I stepped forward. Maybe it's time for people to get over their surprise. He glanced at me like I was something on the bottom of his shoe. I remember you, he said. You used to be the quiet kid. Funny how things turn. People grow. I said, keeping my tone even. They figure out who they are. Jake turned back to Elijah. I'm just saying, not everyone's going to be as open-minded as you're hoping. Elijah stared at him. Then that's their problem. Jake raised his hands. All right, just thought someone should tell you. Before someone else tells Dad or Grandma, and it becomes a whole thing. Elijah stepped forward. If they ask, I'll tell them myself. Jake gave a tight smile. Sure. Good luck with that. He got in his car and drove off without another word. Elijah didn't move for a long time. Eventually, he turned to me. This is going to get harder, isn't it? I nodded. Probably. He exhaled slowly. But worth it. I stepped beside him. Every second. The next few days were quieter, but heavier. It wasn't just a farm anymore. We had something to protect now. Something more fragile than equipment or crop yields. Each time a truck passed property too slowly, I saw Elijah's eyes follow it. Each time his phone buzzed, he checked it like it might explode. But he didn't retreat. He didn't shut me out. In fact, he pulled me closer. One evening, while I was trimming back ivy near the fence line, he came up behind me and wrapped his arms around my waist. Not sneaky, not hidden, just there. You still okay? He asked. I leaned back into him. I'm better than okay. He rested his chin on my shoulder. Sometimes I still think I'm dreaming. Like I'll wake up and you'll be gone. Back to the city. Back to the world that fits you better. I turned around to face him. I used to think the city fit me too. But maybe it just distracted me from the fact that I never really fit anywhere. And now I don't want to fit. I just want to be with you. He kissed me. Soft, long. And when he pulled back, I saw tears in his eyes. Then stay. I already am. Things settled into a strange rhythm after Jake's visit. Not exactly peaceful, but steady. There were still stares at the feed store, still whispers behind our backs at the diner, but no one said anything outright. Maybe it was respect. Maybe it was fear. Maybe it was just good old-fashioned small-town denial. Either way, Elijah and I were still standing. The farm was in full gear now. The hay needed cutting. Irrigation lines were temperamental, and one of the goats had decided to start headbutting the fence like it had a personal vendetta. We laughed more than we had in weeks. Sometimes over dinner, sometimes during chores, sometimes at nothing at all. And in those moments, I caught glimpses of what a real life here could look like. But nothing stays untouched forever. It was a Wednesday when the letter arrived. I found it in the mailbox, folded neatly, no return address. The handwriting was unfamiliar. At first, I thought it might be another one of those anonymous warnings, the kind we could laugh off or burn in the fire pit. But as I opened it, I realized immediately it was something else entirely. Elijah, you don't know me, but I know who you are. I've waited a long time to say this. I think it's time you knew the truth about your mother's will. Your father never told you everything. RM. I read it twice, then a third time. It made no sense. I walked the letter straight to the barn, where Elijah was stacking crates. Hey, I said, holding it out. This came for you. He took it, unfolded it, and scanned it in silence. The muscles in his jaw twitched. Elijah? He didn't answer. He walked to the corner of the barn, folded the letter back up, and shoved it into his back pocket. Elijah, what does it mean? He looked over at me, eyes hard. It means someone's trying to stir up ghosts. I stepped closer. Your mom's will. She died when I was 16. My dad handled all of it. I didn't question anything. Why would I? But now you're questioning it? He sighed and rubbed his temple. There were rumors, old ones, that she left part of the land to someone else, or wanted it sold. But my dad always said he took care of it legally, that it was all his after she passed. And you never saw a copy? I was a kid. No one shows a teenage son legal documents. I hesitated. Do you think your dad lied to you? He looked at me, pain flickering in his eyes. I don't want to think that. But if it's true, then this place might not even be ours to keep. We stood there, surrounded by the sound of the farm, rustling hay, distant chickens. But the silence between us felt louder than everything. Later that night, he pulled out a shoebox from the top shelf of the hall closet. Inside were old letters, birth certificates, a few of his mom's recipes scribbled in the margins of magazines. And at the very bottom, a folded, faded document with a legal seal. Found it, he whispered. He laid it out on the kitchen table, smoothing the edges. It was her will. We read it together, line by line. And there it was, buried in legal phrasing, but clear enough. 25 acres of the west pasture shall be held in trust for the named beneficiary, to be disclosed upon the beneficiary's 21st birthday. Elijah stared at that line like it had slapped him across the face. She never said anything, he whispered. Who would the beneficiary be? He shook his head. I have no idea. The next morning, Elijah called the lawyer's office listed on the will. Disconnected, he called the county records office. They said the case had been closed and sealed years ago. Any further inquiry would need legal counsel. I don't have money for a lawyer, he muttered, pacing the porch. I do, I said quietly. He stopped. No, I'm not offering charity. I'm offering help. We're in this together, remember? He hesitated, then nodded slowly. Okay. So we hired a local attorney, a woman named Marla, sharp and kind in a quiet way. She agreed to look into the matter discreetly. While we waited for her findings, tension seeped back into the house like smoke. Every knock at the door made Elijah jump. Every glance at the pasture held new weight. He became quieter, more distant, not shutting me out, exactly, but withdrawing into himself, like he was trying to protect something too fragile to name. One night, I found him standing outside, staring at the stars. Do you think she wanted me to know? He asked. I think she wanted you to have a choice. He nodded slowly. I keep thinking, what if she had a reason for hiding it? What if it's someone I knew? Someone I hated? You don't know that. No, but what if it's Ben? I blinked. Your brother? He was her favorite. Everyone knew it. What if she left part of the farm him, and my dad buried it so I wouldn't find out? Then you deal with it, together, like you always have. He turned to me, eyes glassy. But what if this breaks everything we built? It won't. You don't know that. You're right. I don't. But I know this. No matter what that paper says, this place is yours. You're the one who kept it alive. You're the one who made it matter. He stared at me for a long time, then stepped forward and kissed me like he needed to feel something solid, something real. And I kissed him back, trying to give him that. The next morning, the phone rang. It was Marla. She had a name, and it wasn't Ben. Elijah stood frozen in the doorway. The phone still pressed his ear even though Marla had hung up almost a full minute ago. His mouth was slightly open, like he was about to say something but hadn't figured out how. I didn't rush him. I just stood in the kitchen, waiting for whatever came next. Finally, he blinked. It's not Ben. I nodded slowly. Okay, then who? He looked at me, eyes wide, almost disbelieving. It's someone I've never even met. That didn't make sense. What do you mean? He stepped further into the kitchen, closing the door behind him as if the cold truth might blow in from outside. His name's Marcus Kane. He's in his early 20s now. Lives 3 towns over. Marla said he was adopted as a baby. I frowned. But why would your mom leave land to someone she didn't raise? Elijah sat down hard, like his knees gave out. Because he's her son. The words didn't register at first. What? She had a baby before she married my dad, he said, voice flat, distant. She gave him up for adoption. No one ever told me. I sat across from him, stunned. You have a half-brother? He nodded, almost mechanically. Apparently. We let the silence stretch for a while. The kitchen clock ticked loudly in the background. like it was trying to make up for how still everything else had become. She must have written the will before she passed, Elijah murmured. Set it all up quietly. Probably figured she'd explain it later, but she died before she ever could. And your dad never told you. He must have known. He handled the estate. He saw the name. So why hide it? Elijah looked up at me. Because he didn't want to share this place with someone who didn't fit his idea of family. The word stung more than I expected, because in a strange way, it was exactly what Elijah had been afraid of for himself, that he wouldn't fit, that his truth would make him unworthy of staying. So now what? I asked. He leaned back in the chair, covering his face with both hands. Now we wait. Marla's contacting Marcus to inform him. If he wants to claim the land, he's within his rights. It was legally set aside for him. And if he doesn't, then nothing changes. And if he does, then a quarter of this place goes to a stranger I've never met. I wanted to tell him that wouldn't happen, that everything would work itself out. But I couldn't lie to him. Not now. The next few days felt like we were holding our breath. Elijah didn't say much. And when he did, it was mostly in short, practical sentences. Fence needs fixing. The pump's acting up. I'll get feed in the morning. I didn't push. I stayed close but quiet. I took over chores without being asked. I cooked. I cleaned. I waited. Because sometimes love means giving someone room to process, even when it kills you to watch them drift. Then, one afternoon, a black pickup truck rolled up the drive. Elijah was in the barn. I was weeding near the porch. I stood up slowly, brushing dirt off my hands, as a young man stepped out of the truck. He was tall, broad shoulders, short-cropped dark hair, clean jeans, and a windbreaker. There was something familiar in the shape of his eyes, like seeing Elijah reflected in a carnival mirror. "You Elijah?" the man called out. Elijah stepped out from the barn, hands dirty, sleeves rolled up. He squinted against the sunlight. "Yeah." The man offered a hand. "Name's Marcus. I think we're related." The air shifted. Elijah approached him slowly, warily. They shook hands, brief, firm, uncertain. "I got a call from some lawyer," Marcus continued. "Said I inherited land. Didn't believe it at first. Thought it was a scam." "It's real," Elijah said quietly. Marcus looked around the farm, nodding to himself. "Place is nice. Quiet. It's home." A long pause. "So what does this mean for you?" Marcus asked. Elijah glanced at me, then back to Marcus. "Depends on what you want." Marcus stuffed his hands into his pockets. "Look, man, I'm not here to take anything from you. I've got a job, a life. I'm not looking to become a farmer overnight." Elijah studied him, still skeptical. "Then why'd you come?" Marcus shrugged. "Because someone left me land I didn't ask for. Because I want to know who the hell this woman was that gave birth to me and never said a word. And maybe because I figured I might find something that made me feel a little less disconnected." Elijah's expression softened just slightly. "She was a good mom. Kind. Smart. She loved this land." Marcus nodded. "That's what the lawyer said." Elijah looked down. "I didn't know about you. I swear. I believe you." Another pause. "You want to see the land?" Elijah asked. "Yeah," Marcus said. "I think I do." They walked off toward the west pasture together. I watched from the porch, unsure of what this meant, unsure of how I even felt. But something about the way they walked, silent but side by side, felt like a start. An hour later, they came back. Marcus shook my hand this time. His grip was strong, but not aggressive. "I'm not taking the land," he said plainly. "I told Elijah already. I don't need it. Don't want it." "You sure?" I asked. He nodded. "Yeah, but I told him, if he ever needs help around here, I wouldn't mind stopping by sometimes. Just to get out of my head, you know?" I smiled. "I think we both understand that." Marcus looked back at Elijah. "She left us for a reason. Maybe it wasn't about the land. Maybe it was about connection." Elijah just nodded. When Marcus drove away, the silence that returned wasn't heavy. It was thoughtful, We sat on the porch that night, not talking much, just breathing. You okay? I finally asked. Elijah nodded slowly. I think I am. I waited. For the first time in a long time, he continued, I feel like I don't have to hold everything together alone. You don't, I said. You never did. He looked at me, eyes full of something deep and steady. I'm glad you stayed. So am I. And under the stars, with nothing but the quiet rustle of the wind and the creak of the porch swing, I realized something. Sometimes families break apart. Sometimes they come back together. And sometimes you build a new one honest piece at a time. The morning air was sharp, the kind that makes your breath visible even before the sun fully rises. Elijah was already outside when I got up, standing in the gravel driveway with his arms folded across his chest. He didn't turn when I opened the door behind him. He didn't have to. He's coming today. Elijah said. I didn't ask who. I already knew. After Marcus's visit, things had shifted, not just between Elijah and me, but deep within him. That tightly guarded part, the one that had long been braced for rejection, had started to open, and with that opening came questions he could no longer ignore. The biggest one being, why had his father kept all of this from him? So Elijah called him, and his father said, simply, I'll come by tomorrow. Now tomorrow had become today. We spent the morning pretending to do chores, but neither of us got much done. The barn was swept twice. The goats fed 3 times. I think Elijah just needed to move, like motion could somehow outrun anxiety. By noon, the familiar rumble of tires on gravel cut through the silence. His father's truck pulled into the driveway. He stepped out slowly. Same worn boots, same faded flannel, same man I'd seen in family photos on the living room wall. But something in his eyes had changed, like age had finally caught up to his stubbornness. Elijah, he said with a curt nod. Dad. His father glanced at me, then back to Elijah. We talking alone? Elijah hesitated, then looked at me. No, he stays. I nodded and stepped closer. His father didn't argue. He just sighed and rubbed the back of his neck. All right then. They stood there facing each other, years of unspoken words between them. You knew, Elijah said, voice firm but low, about Marcus. His father nodded once. Yeah. And you never told me? I didn't think it mattered. Elijah's eyes flashed. Didn't matter? He's my brother. Half, his father corrected. Still my brother. His father looked down at his boots, then up again. Your mom, she made me promise. Said it was too painful to talk about. Said she'd handle it later. But she never got the chance. She handled it, Elijah said bitterly. In her will. But you buried that too. His father didn't deny it. I was trying to protect you, he said. From what? The truth. From everything breaking apart. Elijah laughed, but it was humorless. Newsflash. It broke anyway. You just didn't see it. His father stepped forward, hands clenched. I lost her too, you know, and I did what I thought was right. For you, for the land, for our name. But it wasn't right. No, maybe not. A pause. Long, heavy. Then Elijah asked a question I knew had been rotting inside him for years. Would you have still accepted me if I'd told you back then? His father looked like someone had sucker punched him. You mean about who you are? Elijah nodded once. His father didn't answer immediately. He walked a few steps away, then turned back. I don't know if I would have understood it then, he said quietly. I was raised a certain way, taught to think certain things. But watching you now, running this place, standing on your own 2 feet, loving someone with your whole chest. He looked at me for a beat, then back at Elijah. I'd be a fool not to accept that. Elijah blinked. Hard. So you're not ashamed? I'm ashamed it took me this long to grow the hell up, his father said. But you? No. I'm proud of you. That did it. Elijah's shoulders dropped like a weight had slipped off them. Not all of it, but some. He didn't cry. Not then. But his eyes glistened. And that was enough. His father stepped forward, slower this time. I didn't come here to fix everything, he said. I know I can't, but I want to stop making it worse. Elijah nodded, swallowing thickly. Then start by not disappearing again. I won't. They stood there for another minute. Then his father looked at me again. You take care of him. I already do, I said, and I meant it. His father gave a small nod, climbed back into his truck, and drove off, leaving nothing behind but tire tracks and the echo of a conversation we never thought would happen. Elijah didn't say anything right away. He just walked back to the porch and sat on the top step, elbows on his knees, staring into the open field. I sat next to him. I didn't think I'd hear those words from him, he murmured. You deserve them. He's still stubborn as hell. Apple doesn't fall far. He smirked faintly. Shut up. I bumped his shoulder. Proud of you, you know. He turned to look at me. Really look. And then, in a voice quieter than I'd ever heard him use, he said, You save me, Noah. You save yourself. He shook his head. No, I was hiding, drowning. You pulled me out. I didn't know what to say to that, so I just reached over and took his hand. We sat like that for a while, on a porch that no longer felt haunted, watching fields that suddenly looked like the future instead of the past. Whatever came next, we'd face it together. And for the first time, that actually felt like enough. The summer sun was already climbing by the time I rolled out of bed. It bathed the fields in gold, like everything had been painted fresh overnight. I could hear the quiet hum of the irrigation pump, the bleating of goats in the distance, and Elijah's voice, low, calm, talking to someone out by the barn. I didn't rush to join him. I just stood at the screen door for a moment, taking in the sight. This was our life now. No secrets, no masks, just days that began early and ended with our limbs tangled under a quilt, the smell of soil still on our skin. Things didn't magically fix overnight after his father's visit, but something fundamental shifted. The air between them had softened. They weren't best friends or even close yet, but they were trying, and in a place like this, trying meant everything. Marcus had stopped by a few more times too, once with a six-pack, once just to help fix a fence post that got ripped loose in a storm. He didn't ask for anything, didn't push, just showed up quiet and curious, like he was still figuring out what it meant to be part of a story he'd been written into late. Elijah had started to open up more around him. That alone felt like a small miracle. By the time I joined him outside, Elijah was kneeling in the dirt, working the soil between his fingers with a new batch of seedlings in front of him. He looked up, smiling, sweat already shining on his brow. Mornin', he said, handing me a small trowel. Thought we could finish the new bed before lunch. I sat down next to him without hesitation. Sounds perfect. We worked in silence for a while, occasionally brushing shoulders, our hands moving in unspoken rhythm. It was nothing special on the surface, just planting like we'd done 100 times before, but it felt heavier somehow. Fuller, like the end of one chapter folding gently into the start of another. Dad's coming for dinner, Elijah said suddenly. I paused. Tonight? Yeah, said he's bringing pie. Homemade, apparently. Since when does your dad bake? Since his new girlfriend taught him last month. I stared at him. Wait, he's dating someone? Elijah nodded. Her name's Margie. She runs a quilting club. Oh, this is incredible. Elijah smirked. He said she's the first person who's made him laugh in years. Sounds like someone's finally softening up. He's trying, Elijah said quietly, pushing a seedling into the earth. We both are. I watched him for a moment, the way his fingers pressed so gently into the dirt, like he wasn't just planting something, but grounding himself. You know, I said, a few months ago I couldn't imagine staying in one place for more than a week. Now I don't even want to leave for groceries. He grinned. Good thing we grow our own vegetables. Do we grow ice cream, though? He snorted. You're impossible. I nudged him with my shoulder. And you love it. He didn't deny it. That night, his dad showed up right on time, holding a still warm pie wrapped in a red checkered towel and wearing a flannel shirt that didn't look a day younger than 20 years old. Margie came too. She was a warm burst of energy in floral prints and orthopedic sandals, and within 5 minutes, she had both of us laughing like we were kids again. Dinner was loud, messy, full of stories and jokes and second helpings. At one point, Margie squeezed my hand under the table and whispered, "He's always been proud of you, too." He just didn't know how to say it. Later, as the sun dipped below the fields and fireflies began to flicker in the yard, Elijah and I stood on the porch watching him drive away. He leaned against the rail, eyes fixed on the horizon. "You ever think this would be your life?" "No," I said honestly, "not even a little. And now, I can't imagine anything else." He was quiet for a while. Then he reached into his pocket and pulled something out. A ring. Simple. Silver. No diamonds or flash. Just clean and timeless. My breath caught. "Elijah, I don't need a big speech," he said, voice steady. "Don't even need a yes right now. I just wanted you to know. This is where I want to grow everything. And I can't think of anything worth planting if you're not in it with me." I looked at him, this beautiful, steady, stubborn man who'd once been terrified of his own truth, and now stood here offering it to me like it was the most natural thing in the world. I reached out and closed his fingers around the ring. "Ask me again," I whispered. "Tomorrow, next week, next year, I'll still say yes." He smiled, a real one, wide and full of light. "I can live with that." We didn't need fireworks or champagne. We didn't need a crowd or a perfect moment. We had the stars overhead, the soil beneath our feet, and the quiet hum of a farm that had witnessed every step of our story. And in that stillness, I realized something simple and true. Love doesn't always arrive with grand gestures or declarations. Sometimes it grows quietly, unevenly, awkwardly. But when it takes root, it changes everything, especially you, forever.